Thank you very much for the wonderful hospitality. It's a great pleasure always to be in Brazil, including Brasilia, which I visited some 2-3 decades ago. My presentation is basically on migration and child labor, and the question behind that is the law on the move when the situation is so much on the move? So is the law on the move? And everyone has a personal story to tell about migration and children. So I should have my little story to tell about my visit to Brazil in the 1990s. At that point in time, in the 1990s in Brazil, there was a huge organization of street children. Crianças de Rua, which I remember as a huge organization of street children, which advocated protection and assistance for street children at large, including those coming from rural areas and poverty-driven areas. And despite the many sadnesses facing street children worldwide then and now elsewhere, and here perhaps also, one of the wonderful things they showed me was how to also protect themselves and earn a little living to support themselves, even on the streets. So one of the activities they did was street theater, using local culture and local wisdom to help them with generation of income to help themselves on the streets. And one of the links they use with culture was Iemanjá, the goddess Iemanjá, who they cited as someone giving a blessing on them. But Iemanjá, from my own understanding, is also a link with Africa, in terms of the African Brazilians and the roots in terms of migration from so many years ago, showing both transcontinental migration as well as local and national migration. So that's my little story from the 1990s, and it's a great pleasure to be here again to witness the progress, particularly on the eradication of the causes leading to child labor. So, is the law on the move? Migration interfaces with the issue of child labor in many ways. It can be an internal or cross-border movement. It can be voluntary or coerced, forced. The latter is often linked with a group known as internally displaced persons, not having crossed the frontier, and refugees, those crossing or having crossed a frontier in search of protection, particularly due to persecution and warfare. The word migrant workers denotes a cross-border work-related situation. Yet the status of children and other workers on the move varies from documented or regular, that's to say coming with papers and visas, to undocumented and irregular. From the angle of the recipient country, the less welcoming label, illegal immigrants, particularly under national immigration law, is often used to describe those coming into the country without the relevant papers and to subject them to much discretion, including constraints, restraints, such as detention and deportation. The precarious situation facing children in employment and migration is particularly acute in the informal economy, such as in regard to child domestic workers, children in agriculture, and in various harmful occupations, at times at the fringe of the national law and setting. To be fair, however, migration offers opportunities as well as vulnerabilities. It can lead to improved livelihood and safety, such as a shift from poverty and an escape from a war situation. Yet, the migrant may also land up in an exploitative situation, such as forced labor and human trafficking and smuggling. This dichotomy thus provides a rationale for the need for laws which protect and assist people, including children on the move, and their effective implementation. In this setting, the latest World Migration Report 2013 provides key insights. Although the report does not delve specifically into child labor, it raises many points for reflection, inviting analysis of not only south to north, that's to say from developing countries to developed countries, movements, but also south to south and north to north. It calls for an understanding of the varied patterns of migration, including types of movement, permanent or temporary, status of the migrants, regular or irregular, protection of rights, the extent, for example, to which rights are protected without discrimination, planning, planned or unplanned nature of the flow, scale, the percentage, small or otherwise, of population moving over a lengthy period of time on a mass movement of people over a short period of time, and socio-economic background, gender, age, and marital status, not forgetting the political dynamics of migration and management. Based on a Gallup poll in this report of 500,000 people, the report adds that the findings confirm the divide between the rich and poor, the north and south divide. Whether migration improves well-being depends on where migrants come from and where they go to. Migrants moving from north to north appear to have the easiest experience. By contrast, south to south migrants appear to face more significant challenges. They are the least optimistic about their lives and find it difficult to achieve a satisfactory standard of living. Furthermore, migration seems to make little difference to them financially. Personal safety is a concern. Those migrants between the north and south in either direction have mixed experience. Generally, economic factors play a notable role. Those migrating from the north to the south, Portugal maybe, to Brazil, or perhaps Portugal to some of the African countries such as Angola, enjoy economic prowess as might be expected from those moving to an environment with relatively low living costs. Conversely, those moving from south to north suffer from an economic disparity with the native born. They struggle to make the transition, but are nevertheless better off financially from having migrated than those who stayed at home, unquote. Given those dynamics, it is worth bearing in mind at least 3 stages of migration which invite responsive laws, policies, and practices. 1, pre-flow situation, prior to the act of migration. 2, flow situation, when people are actually on the move. And 3, post-flow situation, when people arrive at a destination or destination country with a view to finding durable solutions for their lives, at times wishing to reside there on a long-term basis, or at times preparing to return to the country or area of origin. International law responds relatively comprehensively to the situation. The most pertinent treaties are the Convention on the Rights of the Child and its various protocols, the various International Labour Organization conventions on the issue, and the UN Convention on the Rights of Migrant Workers and their Families. The child internationally is defined as a person to be protected under 18 years of age. A key principle underlying all these treaties is non-discrimination. The basic rights of all persons must be protected irrespective of origins. On children, there are particular stipulations in regard to the right to humane treatment, the right to free and compulsory education, the right to birth registration, the right to health care, shelter, social security, the right to be protected from abuse, exploitation, and violence, and the right to access justice. Of the 189 conventions emerging from the ILO, many interrelate closely with child migrant labor, including Convention number 138, much cited today, on minimum age of employment, set at no less than 15 years of age, though possibly to be reduced to 14 in developing countries. Convention number 182, prohibiting the worst forms of child labor, such as the use of children in hazardous activities, cited this morning, for example, children in prostitution, pornography, etc., with the need for a minimum age of protection absolutely under 18 years of age. Convention number 97 of the ILO, underlining the rights of migrant labor, such as the principle of non-discrimination for all. Convention number 147, stipulating against exploitation of migrant labor, such as human trafficking. And most recently, Convention number 189, covering the rights of domestic labor, including their freedom of association. And there are also several conventions now on human trafficking, one famously known as the Palermo Protocol under the UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. Meanwhile, the UN Convention on Migrant Workers provides basic guarantees for all migrant workers, irrespective of whether they are documented or not. The rights include the right to life, freedom from torture and cruel treatment, right to free and compulsory education, right to access medical care in emergency situations, and the right of access to justice. These have also been underlined by the ILO under the rubric Social Protection Floor, much heard today. Additional guarantees under this convention are provided to documented migrant workers, those coming with visas, papers, and so on, such as freedom of movement, freedom of association, and the right to send remittances home. However, this UN Convention on Migrant Workers has received a paucity of ratifications, particularly from developed countries and particularly from countries receiving migrant workers. With regard to forced displacement, there are specific treaties offering protection, such as the Refugee Convention 1951 and its protocol, the various Geneva Conventions on Armed Conflicts 1949, 1977, and more, as well as UN-related guiding principles on internal displacement, bolstered by various regional treaties, such as in Europe, the Americas, and Africa. And Africa today has an exemplary convention, particularly on internally displaced persons, as well as specific treaties on children and mechanisms on children and women in terms of monitoring. The challenge is broadened today due to natural disasters, environmental harm, and global warming. Let's go, however, to the national level to see whether the law moves. It is useful to test the presence of laws, policies, and practices from the angle of whether there are adequate responses in regard to the three stages of people on the move noted earlier: pre-flow, flow, and post-flow. A quick, non-exhaustive list may be offered as follows with examples. First, pre-flow. Do laws, policies, and practices enable people to choose, to have the choice to stay rather than move? And if they have to move, do the laws, etc., guarantee their assistance and protection at the very outset? The laws could include the following: on the right to life, humane treatment, and recognition of status, including birth registration for all, residency, and nationality. Laws concerning their development, such as access to school, healthcare, universal healthcare being promoted in my country, Thailand, for example, shelter, social security, social protection for all, as heard this morning, occupational opportunities, including access to credit and small-scale industries, what we have in Brazil known as the Bolsa Familia, in terms of cash transfers to families to help them choose to live and to stay put and to overcome poverty, which is replicated also in South Africa and Indonesia in terms of cash transfers, and other forms of poverty reduction, including in relation to rural development and on congested habitat. Another example in regard to the pre-flow includes the need for laws concerning assistance and protection, such as laws concerning child protection from abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Famously, minimum age of labor, is it there? Is it implemented? Famously, protection from the worst forms of child labor, is it there? Is it implemented? And laws concerning children's participation, such as freedom of expression, association, and collective bargaining. In regard to the flow situation, some questions could interact with these laws. Laws protecting people from forced return to situations of danger, what we call internationally non-refoulement. laws enabling humanitarian assistance and access to persons in need. Very prominently today, the question of access to humanitarian aid for children and others in Syria and in neighboring countries, and laws protecting them from abuse, neglect, and exploitation. And thirdly, for the post-flow, laws, policies, and practices that enable people, including children, to develop, recover, reintegrate, and recuperate with opportunities for the future, including the checklist, perhaps laws facilitating settlement, resettlement, residency, nationality, and or voluntary and safe return to the area of origin, laws enabling access to basic necessities such as birth registration, education, healthcare, shelter, social security, and access to justice, and laws facilitating return to normalcy, including livelihood opportunities, plus the need to overcome poverty and underdevelopment. The realities in several settings, however, are disquieting. Child migrant laborers often find themselves in a situation of abuse, neglect, and exploitation, such as in regard to sexual exploitation, forced labor, debt bondage, drug trafficking, human trafficking, and other harmful activities during one or more of the 3 stages of migration: pre-flow, flow, and post-flow, at times at all those stages. This is sadly also coupled with the lack of or inadequate cooperation both internally and externally to manage migration in a humane and responsible manner. However, in more enlightened settings, there are now measures to attenuate this situation. For instance, many countries have today adopted new laws, policies, and practices, such as on the question of human trafficking, so as to enable these victims to be classified as victims and thus be shifted from immigration detention to welfare shelters, at times with avenues for long-term residency and or guarantees of safe return home. While it may be difficult to verify nationality in all cases, an easier option being explored in some situations is to invoke the previous residency rather than proof of nationality, residency of the migrant worker, so as to enable him to prove his identity or her identity to work in a destination country. A range of regional and bilateral instruments and processes, including regional conventions and bilateral memoranda of understanding, have also emerged as part of cross-frontier cooperation between countries of origin, transit, and destination. On another front, the issue of non-discrimination in regard to birth registration, access to education, healthcare, shelter, and social security, and the right of access to justice is tested on a daily basis in many countries, especially where the child is considered to be undocumented or irregular. In reality, all countries, however, have some laws which can be used to protect children. Which country, for example, does not have a criminal law or criminal code? Every country does. And the question is it implemented in a child-friendly manner? Which countries today don't have some child protection laws? Famously in Brazil, decades ago, the Children's Code, with possible new law on children today in this country. Which country does not have some labor laws, legislation, which can also be used to help children and others? The challenge often is their effective implementation rather than absence. And in the case of absences, it should be noted that some laws, policies, and practices, such as national immigration law in some countries, remain substandard when tested against the backdrop of international law, manifested by the various conventions noted earlier, and need to be reformed as part of the law on the move. For the future, some of the desired orientations for enabling the national law to move towards greater protection and assistance of child migrant workers, labor, include the following. Together. 1. Accede to and or ratify international conventions, as mentioned already, to protect the rights of all children in situations of migration and apply them comprehensively at the national and local levels, as well as to promote in-country and cross-country cooperation on the issue, building bridges between the North, South, and beyond, remembering that in our countries, very often, North and South are there together per country. 2, ensure that laws, policies, and practices respond to the dynamics of migration, interlinking between pre-flow, flow, and post-flow situations based on international standards, including minimum age of employment, including protection from the worst forms of child labor, and regularization of status, with protection also for those who are not regularized yet. Thirdly, couple the existence of laws with adequate policies, mechanisms, practical enforcement, resources, personnel, mechanisms, information, monitoring, education, capacity building, and participatory processes involving communities, civil society, and the children themselves in child-related assistance and protection. Fourth, implement the message that humane treatment, access to birth registration, free and compulsory education, provision of shelter, healthcare, social security, and access to justice are part of the social protection floor for all, to be respected and implemented universally for all children without discrimination. And 5, utilize global, regional, and national opportunities, such as today, and such as the post-2015 agenda, now awaiting the Millennium Development Goals, whose current time frame is for the years 2000 till 2015, as well as various global, regional, and national fora on migration, to highlight child development, protection, and assistance, and to advance a comprehensive agenda to help children on the move. With the law in perpetual motion, with the children at the heart of our world in partnership, in greater motion.